cool. So I think we should start. We met over 20
Do you remember
years
that pub on the other side of the field?
Yeah. Well, that was the sort of defining moment when I left university, came down here, didn't want to be an architect, came to John Pardy's, had an interview with you, refused to have the job, and then you took me for a crab salad at the East End Arms, just across the field there, and I was like, well, actually, maybe I could come down here for a bit. But working with you for those 5 years, I got super into the kind of detail of architecture, the bespoke craft of things. Well, I was obviously doing a lot of 3D work as well, but it was me and you were the guy that I could always come to, and say, okay, what do you think of this? And you'd always be like, oh yeah, that's cool, but what about this? And you'd be able to iterate really quickly and just say, maybe we should look at this, maybe we should look at that. But it was all, and you had this ability to think from the macro to the micro simultaneously. And actually what I loved about your attitude was your ability to not be wedded to a design idea and be able to iterate, sort of really
but sometimes you got to kill a few of your own babies, right? But when you iterate, you kind of iterate, or you change something, that leads to something, you see something, and that sees something, and then you kind of run out that road. And then you have to go sideways to test something else, and then you do that again. So you can do that in several different kind of parallel universes.
We both left in 2010.
Yeah, at the same time, and I set up my own practice. We talked about setting up a practice together.
I still get it. Yeah, I went to London for 2 years and stayed there for 15. But
where did that come from? The idea of setting up the best this company in the world. I mean, how did that start? Because at the beginning, you're just messing around with doing images.
Well, we were just in 3D. We just, we were both architects. We both loved doing the 3D stuff. I did love the detail and building, and doing all of that and actually delivering projects. In the world of like 3D, you had a sort of greater creative freedom and less compromise, and so you could really just get, and also slightly impatient. You get a bigger sort of turnaround of ideas. Because
do you think that's partly why you managed to scale? Whereas I obviously stayed small because that craft of being a small practice, delivering projects, houses and so on, it requires perhaps that minutiae of detail.
Yeah, to scale an architecture practice, and at your scale, where you're so interested in detail and craft in the same way that we were, but in visualization, but to scale that I think is very difficult, because you're a one-off kind of craftsman, a virtuoso, a kind of like, getting into the detail of everything, and to have 50 other people with that same capability and that same belief and that same understanding, and that takes a long time and a lot of effort. And I think it's a little bit like Glenn Murcutt. He was a internationally regarded architect in Australia who's Pritzker Prize winner, broadly regarded as one of the great living architects. He's a one-man band, and he's never gone beyond a one-man band, because craft is what he's all about, hand drawing, perfect, being on site with carpenters,
The world doesn't work like that anymore with health and safety regulations or principal designers. You can hardly be a one-man band anymore. It is so difficult if you want to produce good quality work.
What we did at the start of the Boundary was we had the good fortune to have their craftsmen, and we were able then to be able to craft our images, and we, working with them so closely.
Do you think you have anything creatively in that process when you're doing things?
When it was Peter and I doing one project every 3 months and spending time with the architects, working through things and iterating, and we at that stage, we were very similar to you in that we'd reached the limit of our understanding of what boutique professional practice could be, and then we were like, okay, well, actually, we were starting to find real problems. With all of the admin and all of the difficulties that come with scaling, with employing people for a start, and having monthly payroll and overheads that we hadn't had before. And we got to a point where we were like, we either get someone else in to help us understand how to scale a business, or we just cut back to 2 of us and just go totally boutique, bespoke, 3 projects a year, and just have a nice lifestyle business where we're just crafting. We then scaled up to sort of 30 people over a certain period of time, and then 50, and then at each stage we encountered difficulties, obviously, and but each time it was like, okay, well, we're on the train now, we're doing it. We've got to figure out how we can maintain this quality at scale, because we're committed now.
I thought I would become a normal practice and do more different kind of projects. But then we got an inquiry to do a house in Ukraine back then. It was like a really large 25 million euro house.
Oh, I remember that one.
And we got asked to look at that. But I couldn't get to do a £50,000 school extension because we hadn't done that work before. So I thought like being niche became really important, and therefore staying small and being an expert in a field was really important. The other thing was a friend of mine, he left architecture and go and work for a developer. And he found that a lot of practices weren't up to scratch. He found that he had to work with either small practices that had specialist skills or the really big one that had all the stuff that they could deliver at every level. And he was saying that I think that the medium-sized practice is going to disappear, so that you're going to end up with really big practice that owns technology and have proprietary technology, and it can deal with everything. They can do the big infrastructure projects, they can do the resourcing, and then you're going to end up with small specialists that's going to deal with perhaps a more human side and stuff that's touched by hand.
We always thought, well, if we get to a certain scale where we've got good revenue and good cash flow, we can invest in tech to enable us to do things that would previously have been out of our reach, and then really push the limits of what can be achieved. So I think we're at that scale now, but a lot of our competitors, or have been competitors, who are in that middle ground, as you say, are really struggling because of the rapidly changing sort of technology environment with AI largely.
Do you think that changing the decision-making process in terms of a workflow? Because I think that when we work on details, there is still so many. We still need to make thousands of decisions. So maybe in a day you make 1,000 decisions. During the course of a project, you might make 100,000 decisions. Each decision is worth something in its own right, but when you combine it, then the total sum is so much greater than the past. That's something that's so apparent in our projects, and that's what's creating that je ne sais quoi feeling.
It's a different kind of way of thinking about it. I remember someone saying to us once that in scaling the business, we would no longer be thinking of ourselves as the individually the best in the world at doing the work. We'd be trying to create the best business of its kind in the world, and they were slightly adjacent things. It wasn't. And it's frustrating at times because you want to keep that craft, you want to keep that personal craft, in there. And we still do. I mean, Peter and I are still actually on the tools. We still work in 3ds Max, and we use all of the AI tools and stuff, because that's what we are. We're not businessmen. We're architects. We're creatives. So if I want to explain something to, a team of people, I'll describe it through the same medium. So I'll use the same tools in order to sort of as a sort of either a benchmark or a precedent, and say, this is what I'm talking about. And we saw it in our generation where the people that we worked for earlier on in our careers had grown up with drawing boards. And so then CAD technology came in, and suddenly they didn't shift. None of the people I worked for earlier on in my career, including John Pardy, Rick Mather, Dixon Jones, Norman Foster, none of the senior leadership and the founders could use the new technology. So how could they suddenly were disconnected. They were telling people what they wanted them to do, but without being able to show them what to 50s, 60s, they would be there with their drawing boards saying, right, okay, this is what I want you to do, showing them. And even more than that, as I was saying earlier, Alvarado famously on site sort of saying, I want the pointing to be like this, and just picking up a trowel and demonstrating exactly how he wanted the pointing.
Whereas this day, no one would even know what a trowel is.
No one even know what a trowel is. So I think that, for me, is a key differentiator at scale that Peter and I still have, in that we still are on the tools. Not day-to-day sort of, working on projects necessarily, but if there's a thing that needs to be conveyed, we are still very much up to date with the tools of our trade.
But that's what I call founder mode, right? Because you have grown the business from the start, and you can do pretty much every process, every step of the process. And the same thing, I can do that with the architecture, and you know that you can do it quickly. And that's what I sort of founder mode. So you understand it in a completely different way. And I think that the hard thing is to step away from sometimes the doing, and to step into being a leader and saying, like, this is where we're going to strategize, this is the direction we're doing, and then you're going to enable other people to do that for you. Anyone today can spit out an image with AI software, and you can say, look, that's cool, we can build that for you. And I think that the danger is when you then, if it's taken to a client, Client goes like, I'll have that, but then you have no idea how to deliver it. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next few years. And I think that's going to happen to some extent. You're going to end up with buildings that you can't actually be delivered. To scale an architecture business is a slower process by the nature of the work, because you're building prototypes. We're not, and we're actually going to have to deliver that prototype and build it every time. And every time you're going to come up with a way of doing it, of building it and constructing it.
What I was going to say about that mid-level sort of the image making that's being used by, in AI being used for concept design, basically, in your world and our world, very quickly mock up ideas, mock up sort of design ideas, but also image ideas. What if we change this or do that or make the light shift like, AI for us as a studio is just like any technology that we've had over the last 15 years. Yeah. It's a tool to be used, and we're using it all the time. We've been using it for quite a few years before ChatGPT 5 came along, and the whole world, your mum started using it for her shopping list. And it'll shift the way people think, like you say, industrial revolution. It's how you use it that's exciting, But what we care about ultimately is the finished product, the craft of, the creation of the experience, be it a digital twin or a virtual tour.
If I didn't care about the buildings I did, I would just produce mediocre stuff and, I'd probably have an easier life, right? But you wouldn't be pushing the boundaries, no pun intended, those boundaries, and create something that is really exceptional.
Yeah.
Because that's where that's where the interesting stuff happens.
Yeah. I think in general terms, when we're talking about craft versus scale, I think we're at the scale now where additional growth is actually aiding our ability to produce quality. And I consider that a kind of craft.
To be honest with you, I think that you gotta think about how to systematize things and make certain things more workable on a scale.
Yeah, we could bang on about this all day, obviously, but go for a crab salad and relive our 20-year-old dream.